What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Absolute Auction Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Miner. Joining with me is Mark Shue. Mark, what's going on?
Not much. And today we're talking about quarterbacks. We're getting into tiers, building tiers, strategies, and some strategies we can use in our draft when we're working on our budget and figuring out exactly who to target in our auctions.
That's right. Today we are talking quarterbacks only. So we'll be looking at 1QBs, Superflex, kind of how ways of creating tiers, how to run into your draft with that and go from there. And Mark, you and I had a really good discussion like earlier today of like discussing how we create tiers because, you know, we were looking at the text messaging we were sending back and forth, realizing it was looking like it was out of context. So we got on the phone call, started talking about it, and once again, we are different when it comes to creating tiers because, like you said, you have a tier system you build. Go ahead and discuss more of like how you build this tier system because I actually like it a lot compared to like how people say, auction, like what's the auction dollar on that? But yours is a tier value. Let's hear it, man.
Right. So my tier system is really wide, just to kind of make it kind of a little more accessible. It's easy. I mean, first of all, it started out being easy for me, but I think it also makes placing players into certain buckets a lot easier for other people. So the main setup we have, everything is rated by platinum to gold, silver, bronze, right? And so that platinum tier is like the main. They're players that are eligible to be your top four at the position at the end of the year. Obviously, we can't predict the future, but like we're looking at who can be in that top four. Okay, so I'm gonna pull up my tiers right now. I have 6 players that are in my platinum tier. Obviously, that's more than 4. I still have them ranked sort of in, but I'm really kind of willing to concede that there's a lot of range of outcomes that can happen in a year. And I think that these 6 are probably going to be in the top 4 and probably close to that top 6 that I have them ranked. Right now that's Allen, Lamar, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, and still, I still believe in Patrick Mahomes. He's at the bottom there, but I still believe in him there. So that's the top of my tier, and then I go into the next tier, which would be where can I find the advantage again? Top 4 is an advantage in a 12-team league. Your top third of your league, if you catch one of those top 4 players. That's basically how that sets up. So then the next tier is okay. Well, let's look at quarterback 2. Who's available to get into the top 16? That's one round of quarterbacks plus the top 4 in the quarterback 2 land, basically. So I take all my players that are going to be in my platinum tier, the top 4, and then my gold tier, the top 16, 15. If you want to call it top 5, top 15, that might sound a little more nice. You like round numbers. If you want to do that, go for it. But this is a really good way for you to sort of build the players that are going to be the main starters in a lot of your leagues, your main streaming targets if you're playing, regular redraft fantasy. But also they're going to be your bench depth and all that stuff, and then you kind of know how much you want to spend on that tier based on how far does that tier go down, and then how much or how little are people willing to pay for that last person in the tier versus the top person in the next tier. So it doesn't really matter about the price of the what's going on in the room because an auction room can change so vastly, like after it can change like that, really. And especially with dynasty leagues, you have really deep benches, a lot to account for, and people end up spending their budgets a little too much. But if you start saying, okay, I have my tiers, depending on wherever the room goes, you can sort of say, okay, this is what the price range is kind of going to go for these players. And here's as far as I'm willing to go to spend this much, as I'm already seeing the numbers go through. And that can allow you to sort of save where you maybe have a player that you like more than the rest. For me, I have Mahomes in my platinum tier. Some people after this past season in his fantasy performance might not think that, but I still believe in Mahomes in my top tier. So he might be someone that I look to nominate or I look to put out there and see just how much everybody else feels about them and see if I can get a deal.
That's great. Like you say with Patrick Mahomes, and I'm gonna go back on him because it seems like a lot of people are in on him or out on him. And in my tiers, like I have what I like to call top five tiers, which would be Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow. Those are my guys I know can run the ball good, can pass the ball very good, get score a lot of touchdowns. Patrick Mahomes is number QB8 for me, just behind CJ Stroud and Justin Herbert. And the reason for that is because they're younger quarterbacks to me. I like the younger guys. Yes, CJ Stroud had a down season, but I still have faith in him. And also, now with the additions of Christian Kirk, that kind of gives CJ Stroud a wide receiver that they've been missing. But the one they're not missing is an injured wide receiver. They seem to like the injured wide receivers, and Christian Kirk is one of those kind of guys. Justin Herbert, he started out really good, fell off, and then kind of bounced back this last season. I think that's going to continue on. But with Patrick Mahomes, like, he has not been a QB1 in about 2 seasons overall. He's still been struggling to be a top 12 quarterback, even like as a weekly finisher. So I still like the name. I still trust the name. He's still a QB1 for me, but he's more of a back end. But tier wise, like, he's not that much for like you have him, Mark. He's not that far off where he could actually be finished as QB1. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if like he still is able to finish QB1 this season because he still has that football skill set to be a fantasy league winner for you.
Right, and that's kind of the reason I put him in my platinum, because the range of outcomes kind of dictates that any given year, and who knows, he's had some old busted Travis Kelce this year, some not to disrespect the guy. He's
got one more season. He's coming back for one more season
in history. But he might have some younger talent here with Xavier Worthy, and maybe when Rashee Rice comes back, he might have that upside again. And then Kelce being the third option, maybe they have a better running game than last year. Maybe those fantasy points are a little better than everybody think. And again, I think range of outcomes, he can still be in the top. He's still number 6 for me. Like, I don't think that's unreasonable by anyone. I don't think anyone would say that Patrick Mahomes at 6 is unreasonable if we're talking about linear rankings. But that's the difference in auctions. Like, I'm willing to pay a little bit more to keep Mahomes, even though I don't think anybody else is. That's what I like about this. It's saying to me that guy at the bottom of my tier, and Joe Burrow is one of the guys at the bottom of this tier for me too, because maybe I like rushing quarterbacks, but maybe some people might not think Joe Burrow is a platinum tier player because he doesn't rush all that much. But those two guys, I think, are really easy options, especially in Superflex leagues, Superflex Dynasty, where you and I both know we're going for quarterbacks and receivers most of the time.
heavily.
Throwing out guys like Mahomes and Joe Burrow, who are going to be playing ball for the next 8 years at least, and are probably going to be finishing somewhere in the top 6 at the very least, have the potential to be number 1 any given year. Why don't throw those guys out ahead of Josh Allen or Lamar and see what you might be able to get for those guys that you believe in a little more than everybody else? Or, you can even, and again, when you go into the next tier for me, the top 16 guys, it's about 21 players for me right now altogether with both tiers. But you go to the gold tier, right? And you look at the players at the top. I have Bo Nix at the top for me. I love rushing quarterbacks. Who knew? And debate whatever you want. I don't care if you like my rankings. You don't have to like my rankings. I'm talking about the strategy here. Maybe it's not Bo Nix for you. Maybe it's CJ Stroud for Ryan. That guy's at the top of your next tier. And some people still might think that they're back end quarterback 1, high end quarterback 2. Those are the players you can throw out early because there might not be so much agreement on the price early on. And that allows you to sort of take advantage of where you want to go. In one quarterback dynasty, you obviously still need depth. So the price is way lower and it's a way smaller amount of your budget, but you still need quarterback depth. And in Superflex, it's kind of like it's an immense need to have a really strong quarterback too, a strong quarterback room at the very least, anchored by one solid player. So having those tiers, knowing who you're willing to pay top dollar for and who you're just willing to pay like enough, get the right price, the nice, the good price you can settle on, is a huge difference, a huge advantage. It doesn't have to be rank your players however you want, but if you have a good idea of like who you think's going to be performing in that very top, and then who's going to be kind of like on the splatter plot right after that, that really can help you with deciding how much you want to budget on any position, not just quarterback.
Yeah, and like you said, like your tiers are your tiers. Like there's no one saying that you're wrong. You can't have. There's no way you can have Mahomes at 6. He should be a lot lower than that. What do you mean, Ryan? You have him at 8. He should be higher than that. Your tiers are your tiers. What you see is what you see. And like this is what I like to do. I'm going down my tier line. Like I'll be going through it. I'll list, like right now I have 44 quarterbacks, and I can list multiple tiers. I can say, if I'm going to spend big, here's the quarterbacks I want to spend big on. And then I draw the line there. Here's the next set of quarterbacks I'm comfortable with. I can go in with as an elite starter, but I'm not spending the top dollar, but I feel they have that week winning upside. That's my next tier. The next tier is a nice QB1. It's not going to kill you, but he also might not win your weeks. And the funny thing is, like, I look at my like tier, and like how you said, you have your you say your gold tier is like 16 quarterbacks who could be.
They are basically the players that are going to most likely populate the top 16 at the end of the season, basically with their fantasy performance. I have 21 players that I think are most likely to populate that top 16.
So yeah, basically QBs 1 through 12, then 12A, 12B, 12C. Like it just keeps going down the line, because by the time you start getting lower and lower, your fantasy point spread in your mind probably isn't going to be that much. It's like 5 to 10 points at most, right? Kind of when you look at it like that.
Yeah,
you can see it.
I mean,
you can see that player explode.
Yeah, when you get to the top, when you're at the top of the draft, there's obviously a huge difference in a lot of these players. But I mean, week to week, it goes a lot of different ways. Someone throws 3 touchdowns, they're in the top 5. It's just going to happen and there are going to be players who maybe don't hit their mark. It's a small position, and really anything can happen on an NFL field. The run game could be working, so the quarterback's not throwing touchdowns that game. Like this kind of thing happens a lot, and that's why I feel like you have that, again, where you are with your top tier players that like are really worth spending that top dollar. If you're willing to go into like the low $20 range in a $200 budget on some of those quarterbacks, like that's those are the players you want it to be. You want it to be your platinum tier players. But after that, there's a lot of guys, and there's a lot of other players people want to spend money on. So having that back end tier, that quarterback 12-ish tier that we're talking about is really important. Knowing who you like the most, and honestly, who you don't really care the difference on. Who's the player that it doesn't really matter. Where's the line where it's like, it doesn't matter, I'll just take any of these guys as long as they're less than $5, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly. You have that budget set too. Like you're kind of setting a budget. Like you have your par sheet. You're saying, okay, I'm willing to spend this much on a quarterback. If you spend a little bit more, where are you going to take away from to adjust your line to say, okay, I'm fine to do that here, but I spent too much here. What am I going to do on that point? And that's when you start looking at your tiers again and saying, all right, how low can I go before I'm not spending too much more? If I want to get that $5 quarterback, do I say it now while there's still a lot of money on the table, or do I say it, later in the draft where I'm like, all right, we're looking down lower. There's 6 or 7 QBs higher than this player. I'll use, let's say, like one player I'm not a huge fan of, but a lot of people still are, Anthony Richardson. I'll just try to get that name out there, see what people do with him, and like I'll try to base that off of if they actually do something. And then I'll drop up to another name that I kind of like, like say Bryce Young. Throw him out there. If I can get him for a good deal, I'll be willing to take the deal. But And you convinced me on this one, Mark. Don't set it in stone, of like players to target, because you feel like if you target that player and everyone hears you targeting that player, everyone's also going to bid you up on that player. So that deal that you thought you were going to get for $16 turns into $25. And then they look at us and say, well, you guys you said that we should have targeted, and I spent more than I should have. That's not good advice. And that was what helped you today convince me of this whole tier thing, of trying to give it a better understanding.
Hey, I think a great auction lesson to learn is to never fall too far in love with anybody, because if you do, likely people will notice it and you're gonna pay for it. And if you, or the other way, like if you have a certain type of player you're always going after, people are gonna make you pay for it. So it's even not great for me to say I'm going to go for quarterbacks and wide receivers. I'm not going to go for running backs. If my opponents are really running back heavy, they know that they might get a good running back for a deal. But the thing that I like about tiers is it helps you tell a story. Those top 6 are gone. You know you're spending down on quarterback, or those top 6 platinum tier players are in play still in your Superflex Dynasty League. So you want to make sure you secure one of those gold tier quarterbacks first, while those platinum tier guys are still up there, and then you can sort of make the decision. Okay, do I want to pay up and get another platinum, or do I want to just platoon with a couple of these gold players and save money there? It allows you to sort of, every move you make kind of just says, okay, this tier is telling me this is what I should be paying. If I'm not, if it's, in the $50 range of a $200 budget for the platinum players, or $45 to $50, whatever have you, okay, I'm not spending that much anymore. So now I'm saving a little money and I'm going to the gold tier. And now I can pick up maybe one extra guy here, or I can still save that money back a little further and use it in the next tier. Or find it another place in your draft to do it. The thing that's nice about this is you do this for every single position you have. Right? When your tiers run dry, and then to change your spending limit on those players. And it just kind of puts you in a really good mindset throughout the auction, when you know just how many of those tiered players are gone and how many you have left and what you still need. And then on top of it, how much money you have to do it.
And you guys have any further questions, you can always reach out to us at absoluteauctionpodcast@gmail.com. Mark and I would be happy to answer your guys' questions about your tiers. If you guys need any help with it, let us know. Or you can even hit us up on X. You can find Mark at Primetime Mock, and you can find me, Ryan, at RyanMiner_FFB. We'll be more than happy to help you guys.
I'm on Blue Sky too. I'm on both, but you can hit me up either way. So I think we have a Absolute Auction Blue Sky as well.
Yes, Adam, our other co-host Adam, who does the redraft, handles that one right now.
Yeah, so I'm on either one. If you want to ask me questions, I'm on either, or you can hit up the email.
Yep, and I can show that one more time at absoluteauctionpodcast@gmail.com. All right, Mark. So we've beaten the tiers to death. We have everything all set up for it. We are going into our draft. How do we deploy our tiers in our draft? And I'm gonna kick it off with one quarterback league, because a lot of drafts are 2 quarterback superflex. But if you're deploying your tiers in a 1 QB league, does your tiers shift at all in a 1 QB compared to superflex, or is it still very similar? Like you still have the same tiering?
The tiering is essentially the same. There might be changes within the ranks a little bit, but not much. And I don't know if it's going to change much of the dollar amount. Again,
the dollar amount should change.
You do have within the tiers, you're still ranking them front to back. Like my gold tier goes 7 to 21. I still have numbers for all those players. So on the top end of where you're wanting to spend, maybe if the top in that gold tier, the second one down, is somewhere in the mid 30s, maybe it's in the low 30s, and then the bottom end is, I'm talking super flex now. Sorry, not one quarterback. We wanted to talk one quarterback.
One quarterback, yeah.
Let's back that up. So if your gold tier player Maybe you're willing to spend up to $12 for that first gold tier player, and then moving down to like, hey, maybe even it gets to like $3 for the bottom. But also it's kind of having that. Okay, so that's $3 to $12. That's a huge range and a huge shift, and that's still saying, okay, that's a different price in the auction, but also one quarterback being a onesie position makes us a little bit different. But also, again, all these players theoretically should be players that could enter the top 12, enter that top 16, where again they're getting to that spot where they are making a difference for your roster based on the opportunity cost, right? So if you want to pay up a little more because Brock Purdy or Bo Nix or CJ Stroud are in the top of your tier, you want to pay $10-12. That's not necessarily a bad thing to do. But if you also know there's like, again, you have 10 guys that you're willing to spend that you're probably going to get for $2, and you can get a couple of them for that price, you might want to go that direction just for the sake of your roster and maybe spending up in other places, because you do have to give up something somewhere. And quarterback, especially when it's a onesie position in Dynasty, is an easy place to give it up when you know you're going to have a platoon of a few guys.
Absolutely. I'm 100% behind it. Usually, like when it comes to one QB, I try to go for the best of the best, knowing that if I have it, I'm kind of set it and forget it, and I can kind of teeter back on the $1 to $2 players. Or surprisingly, the waiver wire actually has an abundance of quarterbacks because that one starter goes down, they got the backup. Guess where the backup's at? Not on anyone's roster. The backup's usually in your waiver wire, so it's easy to go in there and grab them. Not easy to go in there and get them. You have to sometimes, bid fab, or you have to, put in a waiver claim for them. But
it's super doable though.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like if you don't get one, if you don't get the top one, the next guy's there. So don't ever feel too bad. Or if you trade for one, their values aren't too high. So one QB is a lot easier. The complication side is the two QB and super flex. And I try to tell people the values of the two QB / super flex are very same. They told me they're not, because in two quarterbacks, you have to start two quarterbacks. Compared to super flex, you don't have to start a second quarterback. You can start a wide receiver, a running back, a tight end. I'm like, I get it, but still at the end of the day, the dollar cost is going to be, everyone's going to want their quarterback as a super flex.
And consistency, it's even still, it's, a bad quarterback can put up 12 to 14 points most weeks, and it's still going to help you more than most flex running backs or receivers are going to have that are, especially if you're playing 2 and 3 flex leagues like that, it's mostly going to be quarterback most of the time. So yeah, it's still important. I get where two quarterback teams are coming from. There is a hard line, right? There's a very you do need to play the quarterbacks, but there's not much flexibility in a super flex either, when it comes down to it.
No, not at all. And like that super, that second quarterback that you're usually looking like two QB super flex. I'm usually aiming for 2 starters for sure. Third as my potential, and fourth as this guy is a bench player, but he has upside.
Right. Yeah. So that's kind of like, I have 4 tiers going, and yours is 44. Mine's 48. But anyway, no, I have 4 different tiers. So platinum then gold. We've talked about that enough. Goes to silver. Those are players that are kind of populating the top 24. In other positions, I use it to populate the top 30, but we have such a small amount of quarterbacks. It's the top 24 just because. And then after that is bottom of the barrel starting QBs, players that are probably not going to either are starting now and are probably not going to keep their job, or players that are not starting now and likely to play a few good games here and there. And then, it just goes to backups who might get lucky and you might be able to start them, and they're, they all have like different merits for why you're putting them in your bottom bronze tier. But it's still, all having like one of each is probably pretty good. But when we're going to 2 QB Superflex, I think that's where the platinum tier is going to tell the story for you. I think it can be really valuable if you secure, because there are more gold tier players, if before the platinum tier is dried up for you. So for me, it's those 6 quarterbacks, right? Allen, Lamar, Mahomes, Hurts, Burrow, and who am I missing? Jaden Daniels. Not in that order, but still, after those 6 are gone, while those 6 are still on the board, or at least a few of them are still on the board, I want to make sure in Superflex I'm securing my first, like a gold tier quarterback. One that I feel good at being my number 2, or like a really good 2, or just a serviceable 1. And then when you have that platinum tier, you can then decide, okay, let's see what the prices are going for. If they're too much, I won't spend. If the price is right and I can spend up, then I have maybe one of the best quarterback rooms in the league because I have a platinum and a gold. Or, I can decide platinum's too expensive. I do have my gold tier quarterback. I can get maybe 2 or more of these quarterbacks, and then I have a really good platoon.
Yeah, I was just going to say
Again,
that.
it helps you tell the story when you know exactly where you kind of value them.
Yeah, like don't fall in love with certain players either. Like, yeah, you might like them, and everyone wants to have them. You're not the only one that wants to have them. There's no secret. Don't lock yourself into thinking you have to buy that one. Like, I have to have, like, you say like you have your top 6 mark. Like you can't say like I'm getting Jalen Hurts no matter what, because you get him.
Right.
Yeah, you can get him no matter what, but then you're going to possibly screw the rest of your team up.
Exactly. And like sometimes in the right moment, maybe it's that number 1 guy. It's that number 1 guy on the board because not everybody's willing to pay that much for him, right? Maybe your number 1 guy is too expensive for everybody else, and you're willing to go that far to land, Josh Allen, or
Yeah.
hey, maybe it's Jane Daniels is your number 1 in Dynasty. Who knows? That you're willing to pay just a little bit more than everybody else, just to secure them as your 1. Maybe that's where the move comes in. But also, if you're like nominating, I think looking for players that are on the good end of that gold tier that you might be able to get a deal on is probably the way to go until the platinum tiers are gone.
Yes, I agree,
100%.
100%.
Because you have the balance of it could go either way for you, and then you can just sort of pick and choose when you get to that moment and when you see what your budget is in that moment.
Yeah, you don't want to fall too far back. You want to kind of stay at the front of the line. You don't want to be going back to, let's say, like a Brock Purdy right off the bat. Like, I'm just going to get Brock Purdy and start there, because next thing you know, You're like, oh man, like I'm kind of screwed because I got to try to find 2 more quarterbacks to pair with this system. You don't want to trap yourself into a trap like that. You want to, like Mark said, trap yourself somewhere towards the front of the next tier, not the middle or the back end of it.
And we talked a few weeks ago about bidding up players and why you shouldn't really bid them up. But like, if you find the right players in Dynasty, like for me, I throw out a lot of young players, especially like the unproven young players that people still are so hot for.
JJ McCarthy.
Right. Players that are going to be in that top 3 rounds of a Dynasty startup, even though they might not have much of a pedigree, like of a resume to stand up to why they're there. Like say last year Marvin Harrison Jr. was going for a lot. And we had talked for a while that we're kind of not buying the hype on the price of Marvin Harrison Jr. in redraft and Dynasty last year.
Mm-hmm.
And you throw one of those players out because you know what, they're still in my gold tier. I can throw that player out, and maybe you'll see how hot people get for them, and that drains money from the room. That's a great move, like that you can say, okay, if I get them for the right price, I'll pay the price. If the price is too high, well, that's good for me because somebody paid more than I probably would have.
All right. We're gonna wrap it up here. We got a question from X today, and it's from my good friend Ben Morgan. You can find him on X at Ben Morgan Fins Up. He actually is part of the Fins Up network. He actually runs the whole thing about the Miami Dolphins. So pretty cool YouTube page. If you've got time to check it out. But his question is, and we've already talked about him earlier tonight, was what's the realistic value in return for Patrick Mahomes this offseason? And we kind of looked at it earlier, and I like to use keep trade cut just kind of get a reference idea, and it doesn't have any auction value, but it has kind of like a trade value chart. So depending on your league, if you just draft, you do your auction draft, and then everyone's just available to be trade. These are some players that were around Patrick Mahomes. So Patrick Mahomes overall is player number 17, QB6. You could trade Ashton Genty, or as I like to call it, this year's rookie pick 101 for Patrick Mahomes straight up. Why in a super flex? That would just be insanely crazy. In one QB, maybe, but I mean, who do you have that's way better than that? Like if you were somehow able to get Jalen Hurts or let's say Lamar Jackson somehow, possibly Jaden Daniels even. I could see possibly trading them for the 101 because you already have younger quarterbacks who are starting to come to, you got, Jaden Daniels is one that's coming into fruition, but Patrick Mahomes is kind of hard to trade in Superflex for me. How about you, Mark? How do you feel about trading him in Superflex?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard when you know that he's probably going to be playing competitive, like contending football for the next probably 8 years or more. Um, to be willing to let him go for a 101 again, especially because it's a running back. We don't want. I'm not going to trade a guy like Mahomes for like the rookie, the 101 running back. Usually, I would have to have a really good running or like quarterback room, like with maybe two other. Like if I happen to get a draft pick that like landed me Bo Nix and that like makes Mahomes like the third quarterback in the room, and I feel like whoever the other two, Bo Nix kind of or one other player, let's say I don't know, say like she had C.J. Stroud and Bo Nix, and I said okay, I could make it all right without Mahomes. Then maybe I'd be willing to trade him and maybe get the 101 if I needed a running back or something like that. But again, it's hard for me to want to get rid of him when I know he's just going to be playing for a long time and still like I just have the feeling that they're more likely to be competing for meaningful games in late into the year more than most other teams in the next however long. So I like the player. He's shown that he can be a player who's capable of being the number one overall quarterback in a given year. I don't think that he's just like magically lost that, and I can I would rather keep him, but it would probably take more than the 101 for me still.
No, I agree with you on that. Like he signed a huge contract. He still has 3 years left on his deal before technically they can really cut him, and that'd be year 8 in 2028. So he signed the contract in 2020. Year 8 has a $5.4 million dead cap, but I don't see them letting him go. I see them keeping him all the way through the end. I mean, basically the contract's 2031. He'll be 36 by then. And after that, 37, it's a $60 million hit. Is he still good? And then 2033, a $60 million hit again. So,
I'm not even necessarily saying that those years matter to me in a like trade value scenario. I'm just saying that he's going to be good and their team is going to be good for a long time here. Based like nobody's going to go into the year and think that Patrick Mahomes isn't going to like if their team is bad, great. That probably means he's got to be thrown a lot for the next few years, right? Like he's still the like a top tier quarterback. He is a large reason for why they are going to continue to be in the playoffs and contending for the playoffs for years to come. And while I understand, like, he's not just some game manager. He makes great throws. He's like it can happen any year, and I'm still just willing to bet that at the price he's going for currently, that I can probably get a little more from him than somebody else. Especially because again, rookie picks don't always work out.
Especially running backs. I mean, like look at the running backs now that came out the same time that Patrick Mahomes came out. Gone. Patrick Mahomes still there. So think about it before you do the trades. Also, in regards to chicken wings, flats or drummies?
Ooh, I think everybody wants to say drums, but I kind of like flats a little bit more than I'm probably the most boring person ever for saying that. But I like the flats. Give me the flats all day. That extra bone makes a good tear. I like it.
I don't. Yeah, I like the drummies. I like drumsticks. I love drumsticks, so that's my way to go.
I don't discriminate, to be honest. I like them all. What are we going? Are we going with a little lemon pepper rub? What are we putting on those wings?
I like if I go to like Buffalo Wild Wings, I usually get spicy garlic.
Ooh, that's good too.
That is.
Yeah. There's this one place near me that does like this hot honey one that I really like, and then these ginger garlic ones that sound not so great, but they're actually really good.
Nice. All right, Mark. That's gonna wrap us up for this week, man. That was a good episode here.
Yeah.
Talk about quarterbacks and strategies. And like I said, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. AbsoluteAuctionPodcast@gmail.com. You can find Mark on Blue Sky, Primetime Mock, also on X on Primetime Mock, and me, Ryan Miner _FFB. And also, don't forget to follow the show at FF Auction Pod and like and subscribe. We'll talk to you guys soon.
See ya.